the people's champion. Our mission is love, our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice, the people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a joy. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights, respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race.
Happy Monday to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us on Let's Start Justice, JFJ's weekly radio show. I'm actually doing the show from our office here, not in studio today again this week. But thank you so much. I hope we're doing well. We appreciate your company each week when you join us for the radio show. And to those who are listening in via YouTube, thank you for your company. And those who are also joining us via Radio Land, always happy to have you here. So today we're going to be discussing young people, our adolescents and youths, just to get a sense of how well they're doing, how well they're managing conflict, how do we promote dispute resolution strategies among our young people. And for the first half of the program, I'm going to be walking you through our presentation last week in Parliament on the Child Diversion Act. And in a little while, we're going to be joined by attorneys at law, Christina Williams, who is a social justice advocate, very prominent youth voice in the space. Always appreciate her reviews. So too, Shanique Bowden, also an attorney at law, Executive Director of Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, and they will join us at 1:30. You will notice that Jade Williams, my co-host, our policy research and advocacy specialist, she is not with us this week again. I think I shared that she is doing some human rights training this week. I think today she's in Spanish Town. I stand corrected. But she is doing a training with law enforcement officers today, and tomorrow she has another training schedule with correctional officers, and those trainings continue for the next several weeks. So I'll be flying solo, I think, for the next 2 or so weeks. All right. So I hope I am doing fairly well alone. All right. So in terms of the trivia question for today, and that will be posted on our IG platform, and you who are on YouTube, you can answer. So the trivia question for today: which agency monitors the use of alternative dispute resolution methods such as mediation in Jamaica? Which agency monitors the use of alternative dispute resolution methods such as mediation in Jamaica? And the did you know question, or the did you know for this week, my apologies, not a question, just a statement, is from our Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. It's section 13, subsection K, subsection I, which speaks to the right for children to be protected. And it says that every child must be looked after and kept safe simply because they are a child. It means a child isn't expected to protect or fend for themselves the way an adult would. Instead, families, which includes parents and guardians, must care for them and meet their needs. Society, which includes schools, communities, churches, neighbors, must not harm or exploit them and should help them grow safely. Just a little bit of tidbit, which is why the Child Care and Protection Act does make it mandatory for you to report any child abuse that you witness. So please call 211 if that is the case. And lastly, the state or the government must create laws, services, and systems like schools, child protection agencies, courts, and healthcare to protect the nation's children. Very important to put all of that in context for the conversation that we're about to have, but more importantly, just so we can appreciate the duty of care that we have towards the nation's children. All right. Now, last week we were in Parliament and we presented as an organization before the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Child Diversion Act. And I really impress upon our listeners just to pay attention to what is happening in Parliament, because it is important that we keep up with the country's proceedings and we can lend our voices and support to the different ministries as they undertake their work, and we can keep them accountable. I'm happy to say that our Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, he relatively behind with reviewing the legislation which was passed in 2018. It came into effect in 2020, and we're a little bit behind in terms of what the statute says, the time period within which we should do a review. Nevertheless, we will be holding our good minister to account. He seems very heartened in ensuring that the proposals from the different agencies are reviewed. He seems committed, is perhaps the word I should have used earlier, in sticking to the timeline in ensuring that Parliament reviews and perhaps put in effect some of the amendments that are being proposed by the different agencies. So JFJ presented last week, and you heard before where we had launched a review of the Child Diversion Act. Now, as I go through some of the key recommendations in our child diversion presentation that was made before the Select Committee, let me start by saying the Child Diversion Act is a critical piece of legislation, and it's one that is intended, as the word divert suggests, to divert children who come in contact or conflict with the law by promoting rehabilitation, and the principle of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, that if a child is to be imprisoned, that imprisonment should be the last resort, and it should be for the shortest time possible. So the child diversion legislation promotes rehabilitation and social intervention for our children. That's the first thing. How the law is structured at this time is that you would see, for those who have the time, but I do suggest that you take the time to, if you don't read the legislation, because reading legislation can be, not everyone can, because it can be confusing, but certainly you can go on the Ministry of Justice's website to get a sense of the law. But when you go through it, you will see, for example, it outlines the child diversion options. So, for example, it will say that a child who has been diverted can get counseling, family sessions, can make amends by doing community work. So you're talking about the different interventions to ensure that the child is not brought back before the courts. It speaks to the eligibility criteria for a child. So, for example, the child may not be eligible if they commit another offense within the 3-year period, or if they commit 3 offenses or 3 instances of an offense. It speaks to the matters that a police can divert a child for. For example, you hear this coming up: sexual intercourse with a person under 16. So 2 children having sexual intercourse with each other. Issues of children who fight in school. So common assault, for example, would be one of the divertible offenses. It speaks to which agencies can refer a child for diversion. And at this point, that is just the courts and the police. All right. So those are some of the big areas under the legislation. Now, when JFJ, we did our review or assessment of the Child Diversion Act, and that review was done between 2020 and January 2024. At the time, the data that we got from the Court Administration Division, the Jamaica Constabulary Force itself, the Ministry of Justice, it indicated that 1,517 children were diverted. In terms of where those diversion came from, 218 of them were diverted by the police or referred for diversion by the police. And when we dug a little bit deeper, it suggested that the department or unit within the JCF that was diverting was the Sissoko branch or unit. So in other words, the offenses that the police was primarily diverting children for at the time was sexual offense matters based on it coming from Sissoko, primarily sexual offenses matters, and we sought clarity. We're happy to report, though, that based on the presentation from the ministry, it seems that the utilization of the diversion program by law enforcement has significantly improved and increased since we got the data. And that's good news. At the time when we did our assessment, 1,234 matters were diverted by the court. So you see some disparity in terms of the number of referrals that the courts made to the diversion program versus the number of referrals that the police made to the diversion program. Why is that important? One, it suggests that, again, there was low utilization by law enforcement. And within that assessment that we did, we actually asked about the familiarity among law enforcement officers of the child diversion program. And the purpose of flagging this is because you want diversion to be utilized as early as possible. That's the principle of diversion. You don't want the children to be interacting unnecessarily so with the adversarial court process. So you want diversion to be utilized very, very early. All right, so we continue to promote greater public education and sensitization among law enforcement officers. And as I indicated at the start, we are seeing, based on the data coming from the Ministry of Justice, since we did our assessment, that more officers are utilizing it. However, we do train police officers a lot. And remember, I said that Jade, for example, is out today. And when we ask how many of you are familiar with the program, it's very, very low, which means that our good officers need to be further sensitized because they are empowered by the law to actually make referrals for diversion. All right. Now, one of the main recommendations that we made, and I'm hopeful that our parliament will accept it. Please go to the PBC and you will see the interaction with the Joint Select Committee. But I made mention earlier that the police and the courts are empowered by law to make a referral to the diversion program. But if we go back to the principle of diversion, where you want a child to be diverted as early as possible, the question is, where is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution in this? Now, prosecutors can recommend to the courts for a child to be diverted, but prosecutors can't independently make a referral to diversion. And in JFJ's humble opinion, we indicated to our parliament that Fiji and South Africa are two examples that parliament could look to have the prosecutors independently make referrals for the diversion program so that you can have less children, again, interacting with the court system. So in other words, if JFJ's recommendation is to be favorably viewed and accepted by Parliament, you would now have the referral agencies expanded to include the police as it currently stands, the courts second as it currently stands, but third, incorporating the prosecutors. All right. I think we're up on a break, so let's take the break and then I walk you through a few more recommendations that we made, including one of the matters which includes the plea being made before diversion is taken up. So we take the break and we pick up in a few.
So some of you have been listening longer than I've been talking on radio, so this is our way of keeping it strong together. Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club on Patreon and stay with us.
Are you ready to turn your sales and marketing skills into high earnings? Nationwide 90 FM is searching for business development executives to help us grow our business and build lasting client relationships. If you have experience across all stages of the sales cycle and possess strong communication, negotiation, and time management skills with a proven sales track record, this opportunity is perfect for you. Join our team and work with the top corporate brands, media agencies, and of course, our on-air personalities. Enjoy networking opportunities, professional growth, and competitive commissions. Ready to take the next step? Send your resume to hr@nationwidenewsnetwork.com today.
All right, welcome back to Let's Start Justice. I'm just giving you a little bit of a breakdown of the conversation that we had in Parliament last week on the child diversion program, and very good initiative and legislation by the Ministry of Justice. But it is our considered opinion here at JFJ that more needs to be done in terms of public education. And you heard the minister agreeing with that sentiment, certainly when he was chairing the select committee. Now, just to bring your attention to another recommendation that we made, forgive me, I'm flipping through some pages now as I speak. So you perhaps saw in the news cycle wherein the Minister of Justice indicated that there may be some misinterpretation of the legislation around guilty pleas versus acknowledgement of responsibility by the courts. And you saw where Chief Justice, the Honorable Brian Sykes, pushed back a little bit on that statement to say that the judges interpret the law and they adhere to the language of the law as they see fit. Now, this is something that we flagged in our recommendation last week to the select committee. And we agree in principle, certainly, with the Chief Justice that, great care must be taken in ensuring that in making pronouncements, certainly there isn't an encroachment on another branch of government, because the branches of government are separate. Certainly, the judiciary is independent of the legislature. However, when we look at the reading of the legislation and certainly reports from defense attorneys, as we put together our own recommendation, there seems to be some uncertainty and perhaps inconsistency in how the matter of guilty plea is treated. And it is our considered opinion here at JFJ that the legislation was not intended to have children make a guilty plea before benefiting from diversion. And given that the language may lead to uncertainty, it is our opinion that Parliament should, as we recommended, seek to remove that uncertainty by making it very clear that there ought to be a legal distinction between a child acknowledging responsibility of an act versus a formal criminal guilty plea. Because the purpose of diversion is for the child to say, I acknowledge that I have perhaps caused harm to an individual. I acknowledge responsibility that I have done X, but not for a formal guilty plea to be entered into the court proceedings. And accordingly, our considered opinion here at JFJ is that Parliament could seek to amend the section, which is Section 10, by stating that if the court is satisfied that the child may be eligible for diversion, the court should adjourn the proceedings without taking a plea and refer the child to the child diversion program. And the court shall not record a plea, conviction, or finding of guilt prior to or as a condition of such referral. And any plea taken in contravention of this section shall be of no legal effect. That is a recommendation that we put forward to Parliament, and we hope that it would be favorably reviewed so that the uncertainty between perhaps what was a parliamentary intent versus the language of the legislation can be remedied by having this particular recommendation done. And it's quite important. All right. There's some other areas that we believe should be revisited. For example, the jurisdiction of the court. So what you may find is that, and this is based on a case that JFJ recently made legal representation for, that in our opinion, by the way, the offense that the child committed was classified as grievous sexual assault, but it was digital penetration. But we know, based on how the law is structured, you will see such matters being all encompassed into grievous sexual assault, so, which is a serious offense because it can carry up to a term of life imprisonment, right? So it can be, have non-custodial, what you would say now, sentences being imposed versus up to life imprisonment, depending on the jurisdiction of the court. Now, what we flagged is that if there is a low offense or petty offense that was committed by a child, then the jurisdiction of the court should automatically be that of the children's court, so that the child can benefit from that protection, or at the very least, the legislation, while carefully ensuring that there is no encroachment on the independence of the judiciary, the legislation should impose a duty on the court where at first appearance or before or as early as possible, the court should consider whether a child is eligible for diversion. Why is that important? We had a matter before the courts, and it was perhaps about the third or fourth appearance before child diversion was even considered. And technically, it was in the jurisdiction of Big People Court. And that is something I think we have to be mindful of. What is the intention of the legislation? And what JFJ is proposing, it's nothing new, because if you read again the language in Fiji, it is something that is considered there. So you have different things that we need to look at to ensure that the legislation is strengthened. All right, I know I'm speaking quite a number of legal matters, but I do hope that as we listen keenly on these proceedings, we can be guided in our own advocacy and paying attention so we have the best child protection framework going forward. Another recommendation that was made before the Joint Select Committee is for the act to be revised to perhaps look to South Africa's framework as one that is a model framework in this respect, which is introducing a tiered diversion framework. So currently, how the legislation is structured is that you have a schedule that the police can be guided as to the offenses for which they can make a referral for diversion. And one, we believe that the legislation should be tiered, where, for example, for those who are familiar with the Bail Act or the previous iteration of the Bail Act, you would see where it would indicate the schedule of offenses that a police could divert versus ones that the courts must divert for versus the more serious offenses. How the legislation is currently structured is that it just has schedule for the police to make referrals for these offenses, and then a broad discretion is granted to the courts. And what you find is that, based on our humble opinion, the courts may be perhaps a little bit hesitant in diverting from more serious offenses, though they have the discretion to do so. And therefore, if legislation perhaps spells out the offenses that the higher tier that the courts can divert, while expanding the matters that the police can divert for, we think that could perhaps lend with greater utilization of the diversion program. Actually, Jade met with some law enforcement officers, and each time we do trainings, we ask their opinions on how the Diversion Act can be expanded and be better. And one of the things the police officers flagged to us is, when you look at the schedule of offenses for which they could make a referral to divert, cybercrime is not included. So you see where the offenses need to be broadened based on the feedback from law enforcement officers. Because the children, unfortunately, not promoting their action clearly, but they are putting things online about their colleagues that they ought not to be put online. So you see elements of cybercrime, unfortunately, those offenses being acted on a little bit more by the young people. So how do we include that in the child diversion report? So again, South Africa is a very good example that we can make a referral to. Now, the last thing I want to mention, and I think it's going to be in need of, a show on its own to deal with this. Now, when we looked at our child diversion report and we assessed the matters that were being diverted or recommended for diversion by the courts, and the number of completed matters, 62% of the completed matters were sexual offense matters. And given that there were no accompanied charges to them, it seems like these were consensual actions between two minors. So, for example, a number of children, based on the diversion data, are having sexual intercourse with each other. Now, JFJ, it is our considered view that there should be the decriminalization of consensual sex among minors. Not because one is endorsing the activity, because clearly children should not be having sex. They should be participating in their school activities and given the risk of STIs and pregnancy and so on. We promote abstinence, but we have to also look at what is the best intervention. And we have to ask ourselves, is imprisoning a child the best approach, or should we decriminalize the activity and promote social interventions, appropriate education through strengthening of the HFLE programs, for example? That is something that we spoke to in Parliament briefly. And you've heard Senator Shireen Golding Campbell on Nationwide speaking to this particular issue. I think we need a topic, a dedicated Let's Start Justice for this topic to be properly ventilated, so we can appreciate the nuances of adolescent development, and again, what is the most appropriate intervention that does not see a child missing school, dragged before the courts to deal with matters that are best dealt with through appropriate interventions, which include counseling, preventative educational session, again, strengthening the HFLE program, empowering parents to speak about things like consent, that's a big one, and how to make appropriate decisions as children that do not put them at risk for pregnancy, STIs, and so on. So I want us to have that discussion in coming weeks on the matter of decriminalizing. And I have to say consensual sex, because I hear people push back. Why are you saying consensual? Because children can't consent. We use the word consensual so you understand that it's not forced. There's no coercion. It's two children who are exploring, who believe they are young and in love, and so on. And again, what is the best intervention to deal with those matters? We're behind on the break, so let's take the break and then we pick up with the rest of the show.
Been hearing the teasers. Now it's official. Beginning Monday, February 9, 2026, Nationwide News Network launches something special. The Nationwide Family Club, exclusively on Patreon.
With the Family Club, members get early access to our documentaries before anyone else. Some of your favorite segments, including Cliff Says, What's on My Mind, Cover Story, and others, will now be a click away inside the Family Club. There are 3 tiers of membership. First, Bronze, the Family Insider, behind-the-scenes access, Monday motivational videos, members-only chats, and on-air birthdays and anniversary shoutouts.
Second, Silver, Nationwide VIP. Breaking news alerts, exclusive documentaries, quizzes, personal milestones celebrated on air, and weekly family roll call mentions. Oh, and for our biggest supporters,
Our gold category, elite listener, full archive access, early releases, private studio tours, live show experiences, personalized birthday videos, and exclusive live streams. From historic election coverage to lifetime, impact, Jamaican milestones, and rare archive content. This is nationwide like you've never seen it before.
Join the family. Support Nationwide 90 FM, the station that informs, entertains, and educates. Visit patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. That's patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. Nationwide Family Club, where you are family, because we see you as family.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Tune in to OPM On Air every Tuesday from 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. on Cliff Hughes Online. Each week, government ministers engage directly with the public, answering questions, addressing concerns, and sharing important national updates. OPM On Air, your voice, your government, your conversation.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing issues around diversion and conflict resolution among our young people. Shanique Bowden, the Executive Director of JAN, is on. But I just wanted to quickly read a comment here from Alex Smith on YouTube. We need to get back to the life where children act like a child and do childish things. For example, playing marbles and you know, remember using box drink to make cars and slingshots and so on. But I agree with you, Alec. The thing that with JFJ's point that we're making, however, what is the best intervention to deal with certain matters of our children that does not include imprisoning them at all. Yeah, but more conversation to be had. But anyway, Shanique Bowden, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, good afternoon, Mikhail. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're able to hear me clearly because I'm actually at a school. So, the joys of school children in the background.
Okay, all right. Shanique, you launched a report last week. If we could just start there with you, just giving an overview of what that report entailed.
Repeat that?
You launched a report, I believe, last week.
I'm a bit taken aback because I'm not sure what report that is.
Oh, I thought you launched a report. Okay, my apologies.
So, perhaps you're referring to our event that we had on Friday.
Yes.
Yes, so it wasn't
I thought a report was launched, but please walk us through that.
No, so we had an event on Friday on the 27th looking at digital gender-based violence and how GBV is now manifesting in the online space, and just reviewing on some of the recommendations or steps that are coming out in Parliament around Cybercrimes Act, legislation around revenge porn, etc. So it was largely a public awareness effort to get more persons aware that, yes, GBV is still a very strong, pervasive issue in Jamaica, but we also now have to contend with the online environment as well as the real environment. So it was a part of our Canada Fund for Local Initiative project funded through the Canada Eye Commission, and that was one of our key activities that we'd have done last week.
Okay, great. Thank you. Before Christina Williams is on, but before we bring in Christina, if you could, Shanique, if you could just explain perhaps specifically among young people, because we're going to go into dispute resolution shortly.
Yeah.
What is the data or your experience saying around how children perhaps are engaging in cyberbullying and gender-based violence?
Yeah, and it's actually a very good question to have asked, because when I was preparing for the interview and thinking about some of the things that we're seeing around conflict in schools right now, we've done a number of sessions. I want to say maybe about 6, maybe 7 sessions, visiting schools to talk to students about violence prevention strategies. And one of the things that we mainly ask them is, what are you guys having conflict about? And it's actually quite alarming that we are seeing in our schools that they're having these little issues with their, their intimate relationships. So they have their boyfriends, they have their girlfriends, somebody like their boyfriend, somebody like their girlfriend, they're going to fight about it, And so that's actually something that we do see happening, that there's this, teenage dating violence sort of issues arising from intimate romantic relationships among students. But then also what we also are seeing anecdotally is a sort of translation online. In this advent of, TikTok, back in my day, it was Facebook. But we see on TikTok, just like videos of, boys and girls in their relationships sort of navigating. But then sometimes we see like fights or arguments manifesting online. I don't know if it's like tantamount exactly to like cyberbullying, but like these ideas of like taunts, one student talking to a next girl, leave my man alone sort of thing. We see that happening in a very like anecdotal way.
Yeah. Okay. Christina, thank you so much for joining. Christina Williams, attorney at law, social justice advocate. Christina, you're muted. If you
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
I'm here. Thank you, Mikael.
What are some of the issues that you're seeing among young people around violence? So, for example, recently we heard about the Casey and the Calabar student. What is coming out from where you sit?
Thanks again, Mikael, for having me. What I would say is that some of this is really a spillover from family conflict, community conflict, concerns that the young people are having within their communities and their homes. And because in some situations, not all, but in some, our young people may not necessarily have the best of examples for conflict resolution, what that looks like. And so without good examples, they mirror what they see, which we know aren't the best ways of how to handle disputes. And they bring that to the classroom and they bring that into the streets. So that's one thing that we're seeing. Another issue that is arising is the identity crisis that is, I would say, is manifesting online. So a lot of the bullying that we're seeing is around issues of what you look like and what you believe in. So this is, we call it identity crisis per se. I know my colleague Shanique just explained a bit about, relationships and conflicts around that, surprisingly, even among the more younger cohorts of young people. But once again, I think that's really, from where I sit and the work that I've been doing, it's really a mirror of what they're seeing in their homes. So I think then the solution will be, I don't know if we had solutions yet.
So please go ahead. But let me say, clarify for me the identity crisis a little bit more. Is that
sure?
For example, how you may view religion, or just how you look, or how the perception of beauty standards are? If you could explain.
Of course, it's a mixture of that. So it is from a place of beauty standards, quote unquote, what it is that is considered attractive or unattractive, and someone coming online to say to this young girl that, oh, she's not attractive, and so they use particular language, derogatory language, to describe this person. The same for a boy. It happens on both sides of the spectrum. And then there's also about who they perceive this person to be. So it's so funny because you see situations where they'll say, well, you think you're better than people, or you think you're bright, and you take on these negative connotations around, I would think, status and class. And I think a lot of this is really just a manifestation of the division that we have in society generally, which is why I keep bringing back this mirroring that's happening. I don't think that the issues that we're seeing experienced by young people, or the conflicts that that we're seeing in our schools, is anywhere divorced from what's happening generally in society, Mikel. Yeah. And so the solution then, I think, and what I see work from where I sit, is how is it that we create better examples for these young people? And how is it that we continue to reinforce these better examples? Because in the school settings, we have different interventions, right? And we have different groups like JN, for example, that will go in and do wonderful, incredible workshops. But the issue I see is that with the lack of reinforcement, they're not seeing it every day. A great workshop one day, yes. A great intervention by some visiting party, yes. But it's a constant being reinforced, and so it doesn't stick. And my grandma always say, bend the tree from its young. That bending requires constant intervention and assistance. So because of that, I think our young people are not able to learn and emulate the examples that we would want.
Yeah, great. Let's take the break, and then I pick up with Shanique in terms of what are the other solutions that we can look at as a society, role of parents, teachers, the wider societal norms, and so on. So we take the break.
This station raised me. It gave me a voice. And if Nationwide has ever meant something to you, come on in. Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club today on Patreon.
From the biggest tracks to the biggest energy, Nationwide keeps it moving. If you love the vibes, come and lock in with us for real.
World boss, leave a prison could stop me.
Join the Nationwide 90 FM Family Club today on Patreon.
Practice. God, me say you watch you over me practice.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing the issue of dispute resolution, conflict management in schools. Before the break, we heard from Christina, just giving an example of how we need to set better examples as adults and more sustained approaches in what we're doing. So I'm going to ask Shanique Bowden just to give her input in terms of what are some of the other solutions that we can look to.
Yeah, so I think as Christina was talking, Mikhail, about like the programs and those sort of stuff, I do think that there is a big issue, not only just where this topic is concerned around just sustainability. So yes, somebody will go in and do a flashy workshop or sensitization session one day, and then that's it, because it's not a sustainable endeavor. But I do think where teachers are concerned, particularly, I'm not really sure what the level looks like in terms of what they're teaching at the teachers' college, but there needs to be like a strong emphasis around conflict resolution skills for teachers, emotional intelligence, navigating and leading with emotional intelligence as a teacher. Because the reality is, I've seen it firsthand. Sometimes how teachers treat or interact with their children, with their students, can influence how that child may react, not only to the teacher but even to their peers. I've seen firsthand, like a teacher maybe saying something to or about a student, which I'm just like, I don't know how I personally feel about it. I don't think that's something I would say to a literal child, but they're internalizing as children these things. Teachers making certain remarks or certain suggestions, and they internalize that. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed at the school level in terms of the day-to-day. They're interacting with their teachers day-to-day. If they do not feel as though their teacher is someone who is supportive, who is someone that they can confide in, even if they are having other issues independently, that might not be an avenue for them to get help. And that comes due to a lack of emotional intelligence, the teacher's own inability to navigate and resolve conflicts before they escalate, and that's something that definitely needs to intervention from as early as when they're going through their schooling program to get their certification. I also do think too, when we think about the environments in which children grow up, many of what they see at home, Christina used the word mirror, is mirrored in how they will act when they go into the real world, when they go out.
I think we lost Shanique. I'm not hearing Shanique. I think she's still speaking, but it's very low. Christina, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. While Nationwide fixes that so we can hear Shanique much better. We have the state interventions, Christina, the restorative justice programs and so on. What else can be done differently or scaled up by the state with the necessary interventions? We know pals in the day and so on. What are your views there?
I think my view is that we have to revise and revamp what it means by guidance and counseling in schools. I think guidance and counseling has taken on this this approach where you deliver family life education, which mind you, should have peace and conflict resolution as a part of its curriculum, but it has taken on this health and family life teaching, and you're filling certain gaps, but it's not as focused on the counseling as much as it ought to. And let me put it out there, a disclaimer, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm saying this and it's not the case as it is in schools, then, I stand corrected. But I feel as if there needs to be more focus on counseling. And then the psychosocial approach should extend beyond the guidance and counseling department to it being just a way of life, or a way of schooling, rather, in the institutions, whereby when Shanique was saying is, well, because psychosocial support is embedded in the school, it means that every single teacher, every single learning provider in that institution is trained. There's a basic standard of delivery that you will have that will cater for the emotional well-being of our students. We also look at it in a more comprehensive way, because it's one thing to teach a child about quote unquote peace, but I don't know if I should even say this on air, Mikel, but a hungry child is an angry child, you know, Mikel. A hungry child is a hungry child. And so for me, well-being, mental well-being also needs physical well-being. And we already talked a bit about, you know, examples and, you know, what's happening in the community and in the home. I don't need to reiterate that anymore. But we need to look at our children as full beings, full human beings who need these different parameters met in order for them to be able to handle triggers and tension in the classroom. And I think if you think about it in a more comprehensive way, the interventions that we will have will also be more comprehensive.
Yeah. And, you know, just to add, as you were speaking, the Health Family Life and Education Program, the HFLE, it does have life skills in it, which would include some of the programs that you're suggesting based on the curricula. The challenge is that not every school has a dedicated HFLE teacher. And, you know, you find it difficult, for example, with even guidance counselors wherein it's shared among a group of schools. So, for example, Monday and Friday, the guidance counselor may visit school A, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, another school, and so on. So not all schools have the dedicated guidance counselors to deal with the psychosocial issues. So I completely agree with you that those things need to be scaled up.
Agreed. And that's interesting that you've mentioned that, because there was a time when it used to be at least one guidance counselor per school. So the fact that we are falling to a shared communal guidance counselor, we definitely need some additional investment in that area.
Yeah, definitely. Shanique, are you back with us?
Here.
Yes, you please finish the point that you were making earlier. We lost you for a bit.
I think the last thing I was speaking on was about the parents.
Yes.
And I was just saying that, you know, the students that are coming into the school environment, they're seeing certain things in their home. They see their mother treat their father a certain way, their father treat their mother a certain way, how they treat their siblings, etc. And that can also influence how it is that they themselves internalize certain ideals and how they navigate conflicts themselves. And so, like, I mean, I know we talk about, like, things like parenting classes and those sort of things, but I don't know in terms of just the real resources that are available at a ministerial government programming level for parents themselves who are, you know, in need of that sort of guidance, and how to, like, navigate, you know, a child that may be acting out, a child that may need a little bit more guidance than most, or to navigate even conflicts themselves that they're having with their partner, their own parents, etc., and how their child may influence, how that may influence how their child behaves. So I think that is one significant gap that still remains, that we have parents who want the best for their children but may not always know how to be the best for their children, and that the resources that they may need may not always be readily available to support them in that endeavor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Christine, I'll give the last word to you for about 30 seconds so we can close out.
I think the last thing I will say is the other part of dispute resolution interventions need to look at the punishment that we mete out. I've always been advocating against punitive punishment, like out-of-school suspensions, etc., because I feel as if we force our students back into volatile environments that further reinforce those bad behaviors. So that's my last thing I would say, is that when these young people are flagged as being quote unquote at risk, not my preferred term, and they need guidance and support, that's what we should provide. Guidance and support, not additional punishment. There need to at least be some preliminary and continuous interventions before we get to punishment. Thank you, Mikel.
Thank you so much. Christina Williams, attorney at law, Shanique Bowden, attorney at law and executive director for JAN. Appreciate both of you for joining us. We take the break and then we close out.
It's time for Hot Listings, Nationwide 90 FM's on-air classifieds, made for quick ads and fast results.
Call J&J Electrical for all your washing machine, refrigerator, air conditioner, stove, and television repairs. J&J Electrical, 876-403-7302. That's 876-403-7302.
That was Hot Listings on Nationwide 90 FM. Listings start as low as $1,500. Call 876-630-1210 to book yours today.
All right, welcome back to Let's Start Justice. It's two things. I just want to lend my support to my colleagues, Christina Williams and Shanique Bowden, when, they were speaking. Let me start with Christina's point around in-school suspension rather than out-of-school suspension. And you see some schools that I believe better understand appropriate response mechanisms to children when they act in a way that they are not to. Because you recognize, one, that the social environment that a child is growing up in may not be conducive for out-of-school suspension. So, for example, you send back the child to the home environment, wherein, especially in the tenement yard settings, in some communities that have the negative influence for the maladaptive behaviors to be reinforced. So it makes no sense, because if the purpose is for a child to learn and grow and reform, why are you sending them out of school? To do what? To stay home and be on a joyful holiday period and then come back to school in 3 days' time with the same negative behavior? So I think we have to rethink how we think about appropriate mechanisms to reform behavior, among our children when they act in a way that they are not supposed to. And to Shanique's point, I keep reiterating myself the issue of parental support and guidance. There is no handbook. When you decide to have a child, and some people have a child not because you plan for it, because it just happened. There's no parenting handbook. Our parenting classes. Maybe there should be. But I think we need to look at how we engage our parents in a sustained manner. And I keep going back to the National Parenting Commission and what perhaps they are doing there, how we have perhaps street theater coming from the Ministry of Culture and Entertainment, more edutainment approaches, so that we as parents, we can demonstrate appropriate behavior for our children. Sorry, I said it was the children's. Where so that school would be so ashamed of me. So our children can emulate in terms of their behavior. So I just wanted to lend my thoughts to what parenting trainings and seminars can be done in a sustained manner. JFJ, when we do school interventions, we have actions of consequences as our approach. So children understand not just negative consequences, but positive consequences of their actions. So you want the nice girl when they get bigger, the nice boy when they get older, and at an appropriate age, you have to work towards it, right? Because when you're older, you want somebody who can stand on their own, be independent and so on, and have the nice things in a lawful way. We talk about you want to be rich and or whatever the dreams are. How do you work towards that as a child? And also the negative consequences. What are the consequences if you hit another child for common assault occasioning bodily harm? Children have to appreciate both the positive and the negative consequences of their actions. Anyway, that's where we have to leave it today. We need to have more conversation around, children having sex with each other and the implications of it. So much more to digest there. But the winner for today's trivia, and the answer is Dispute Resolution Foundation, by the way. And the winner this week is Competent Corinne, if I'm pronouncing it properly. Please send a WhatsApp to 876-239-7583 and claim your prize, all right? So have a blessed week, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on Let's Start Justice. We see you next week. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ. Walk good.
justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Jamaica, we have been tested before, and every time we rise. Together, we will rebuild stronger, safer, and united. Hope lives here. The time by the office of the Prime Minister is
1 minute after 2.
CFOs and senior decision makers across the Caribbean, this is your moment. The Caribbean CFO Summit goes live March 24 and 25, 2026. 2 days, 13 CPD accredited hours, one powerful virtual gathering of the region's leading finance minds. This is where strategy meets innovation, where restructuring meets execution, where finance leaders prepare for what the next decade demands. Registration closes March 24. Do not sit this one out. Secure your seat now at CaribbeanCFOSummit.com.
You may have been hearing the teasers. Now it's official. Beginning Monday, February 9, 2026, Nationwide News Network launches something special. The Nationwide Family Club, exclusively on Patreon.
With the Family Club, members get early access to our documentaries before anyone else. Some of your favorite segments, including Cliff Says, What's on My Mind, Cover Story, and others, will now be a click away inside the Family Club. There are 3 tiers of membership. First, Bronze, the Family Insider, behind-the-scenes access, Monday motivational videos, members-only chats, and on-air birthdays and anniversary shoutouts.
Second, Silver, Nationwide VIP. Breaking news alerts, exclusive documentaries, quizzes, personal milestones celebrated on air, and weekly family roll call mentions. Oh, and for our biggest supporters,
our gold category, elite listener, full archive access, early releases, private studio tours, live show experiences, personalized birthday videos, and exclusive live streams. From historic election coverage to lifetime, impact, Jamaican milestones, and rare archive content. This is nationwide like you've never seen it before.
Join the family. Support Nationwide 90 FM, the station that informs, entertains, and educates. Visit patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. That's patreon.com/Nationwide News Network. Nationwide Family Club, where you are family, because we see you as family.
Tune in to